Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 10 of the Ecce Romani textbook and the story. So in this chapter, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you've really got a handle on verb endings. That's what the big grammar point is. So as always, I would recommend you look at the vocab, make sure you've prepped it, you understand it, and you feel pretty good and confident in it. That way you understand what the words are in this story. And then you should be looking at the grammar too. Make sure you've read through the grammar, you understand the idea of verb endings, and we'll review it a little bit in this video too, but you can't really be successful until you have that in your back pocket and you feel comfortable with it. Then once you're in that place, you should read the story out loud. Like I always say, find a classmate, find a partner, anyone that you can read this to and have them read it back to you. That way you're practicing not only your speaking skills, which will help you understand the Latin, but also your listening skills. If you combine those two things, you're going to get a much better sense of how the story works, how the grammar works, and you'll catch a lot of different grammar aspects of the story just by hearing it, which will just make you better at Latin. So that would be my advice. Always start there. To start this video, though, we want to do a little review of verb endings. Like I said, that's the main grammar point of this chapter. And you want to remember that in Latin, it's not about pronouns like it is in English. It's about the verb ending. The verb ending will tell you who's performing the action. So in this chapter, you're getting a dose of how conjugation works, which I'll leave for, you can either read the textbook or look at my chapter 10 grammar video, whatever you need. But at the end of the day, what we're really after are verb endings. So remember, if a verb ends in an O, it means I am doing something. S means you are doing something. A T means he, she, or it is doing something. MUS equates to we. TIS equates to you all, and the NT equates to they in English, right? So like I said, in English, we need these pronouns. In Latin, you don't. The verb ending is telling you what's going on and who's performing the action. So you want to make sure that you have a good sense of that before you dive into the story and before you move on to chapter 11, because this is a really important idea, and you need to have this locked down before we start adding more tenses and things like that. Another aspect of the grammar that you got in this chapter is the imperative mood. So if you don't want to call it a mood, that's totally fine. But an imperative is a form of a verb, you could say. And it's when you're giving a command to someone. It comes from the Latin verb imperare, which means to command. So you can hear it in English. Even if you're commanding someone in English, it just sounds different. So if a parent or guardian were to say, hey, clean your room, you're not saying you clean your room, you're just saying clean. You'll notice that there's no person attached to it, right? You're not telling any particular person to clean the room. It's just like, hey, you clean your room. It sounds different, right? It's because it's a command. And in Latin, we call these imperatives. Now, there's two types of imperatives you can use. What we call a positive imperative, which is when you're telling someone to do something. And we have singular and plural versions if you're telling one person or more than one person. And we have a negative imperative, which is when you're telling someone or a group of people to not do something. So the general idea is this. A singular positive imperative is when you're telling one person to do something. You go to the infinitive and you drop the RE. That is the singular positive imperative. So one way of thinking about it is the singular positive imperative is the present stem of a Latin verb. The plural positive imperative is when you're telling more than one person to do something. You go to the infinitive and drop the RE, but you add the ending TE, right? And I'll show you examples as we go through the story. Then on the other side, we have negative imperatives. These are when you're telling one person to not do something, a singular negative, that is. And for that, you use the word noli. You do noli plus the infinitive, right? So if you were to say, for instance, noli ambulare, you're telling one person don't walk. Right? Then you have the plural negative imperative. This is when you're telling two or more people to not do something. And you use nolite, which you'll notice is noli with a TE. So it's related to the plural positive imperative. They have similar ideas happening here. But nolite plus the infinitive means you're telling a group of people to not do something. So you want to make sure that you have this locked down and you feel comfortable with it so that you can move through the story and not get tripped up by the verb endings or the imperatives. Just make sure that you've gone through and you've read this before you dive in. So now you're ready to dive in. This is the chapter story, and again, we're going to highlight the different cases with different colors, and we're going to take it piece by piece. So in the first paragraph, you have interea in villa Corneliana omnes strenue laborant. So it's saying meanwhile, right? Interea, meanwhile, in the house of the Corneliuses, right? The Cornelius' house, villa Corneliana translates basically to that. And you'll notice that it's ablative because you're inside the house. So in the Cornelius' house, omnes, there's your subject, everyone, laborant is working hard, strenue. And you'll notice again that laborant has an NT on the end of it because it's going with omnes, everyone. Then you continue. You have Aurelia tunicam et stolam et palam geret. So Aurelia is our subject, right? She's nominative. Gerrit means he, she, or it wears. So you're saying Aurelia wears or is wearing. And just to come back to the conjugation grammar of this chapter, you'll notice that Gerrit ends in an IT. It's a third conjugation verb, gerere, right? So you flip the E to an I. Just pay attention to that. Not a major deal here, but it's something you do want to catch in terms of the grammar. So you're saying Aurelia is wearing. What is she wearing? We need some direct objects. You have tunicam, stolam, and pallam. She's wearing the tunica, the stola, and the palla. And remember from our culture unit, the tunica is like the shirt, the tunic, right? A stola is sort of like the female equivalent to a toga, right? It goes all the way down to your feet, basically. A sleeveless, sort of like a toga rather. And a palla is like a shawl, right? It's a shawl that you would wear over your shoulders. So she's wearing the typical things that a Roman woman of her social class would wear. Then it continues. You have angulam iubet, alias tunicas, et stolas, et pallas, and kistam ponere. So she orders iubet, the angulam, the slave woman, or a slave woman, right? She orders a slave woman, and you have to go all the way to the end to find out what is she ordering the slave woman to do. Ponere, to place or to put. So she's ordering the slave woman to put alias tunicas, the other tunics, right? And alias here, the adjective is kind of describing tunicas, stolas, and pallas. It's going with all of them. So you're saying she orders the slave woman to place, ponere, the other tunics, right? Alias tunicas, and the other stolas, right? Stolas, and pallas, right? So it's just the plural form of what we just saw in the last sentence, right? Tunicam, stolam, and pallam. She orders the slave woman to put them all in kistam. It's accusative, so she's saying to put them into a chest, right? Because remember, the family is getting ready to leave for Rome. Then it continues. You have Marcus et Sextus, tunicas et togas praetextas gerunt, quod in itinere et in urbe togas praetextas liberi gerere solent. So it's a long sentence, but it starts with Marcus and Sextus. That's our first subject. Right? What are they doing? Since there's two of them, we need a verb that ends in an NT, and it's right there, gerunt, right? They wear. So you're saying Marcus and Sextus wear tunicas, right? Tunicas, and toga praetextas, right? So that's what they're wearing. They're wearing tunics and their togas. The toga praetexta is the one with the thin purple stripe, and it represents that they're the children of a Roman senator, right? And they're wearing these because, quote, on a journey in itinere, and again, it's ablative because you're saying on a journey, right? You're not going into a journey, just in general, on a journey, and in the city, right? In urbe, again, since it's ablative, you're saying inside the city, right? On a journey and in the city. Children, liberi, there's our new subject, right? Because you have sort of the second clause here, quote is a conjunction, kind of joining them together. So you're saying because children, liberi, are accustomed to wearing, gerere solent. Solent means they usually, or they are accustomed. Gerere means to wear, right? So they're accustomed to wearing togas praetextas. They're accustomed to wearing, or they usually wear toga praetextas on a journey and in the city, right? Then we continue. You have servus, alias tunicas, et togas praetextas, in kistam ponet. So we have a new subject here, servus, right? The slave. Ponet means places, he, she, or it places, or puts. In this case, it's referring to the slave. So a slave puts the other tunicas, right, alias tunicas, other tunics, and toga praetextas in kistam, into a chest. It's mimicking the same sentence we saw above when the slave woman is putting stolas and pallas into a chest, right, and tunicas. Now it's the same idea, but you have a servus, a male slave, doing the same thing. The tunics and the toga praetextas are going into a chest. Then it continues, in cubiculo Gai, servus togas viriles in kistam ponet, quod Gaius in urbe togam virilem gerere sole. So you're saying in the bedroom of Gaius, in cubiculo ablative, because you're in his bedroom, Gaius is genitive of Gaius. The slave, servus, puts, ponet, toga viriles, right, that's the white toga, the toga of manhood, into a chest. Because, quote, Gaius, there's our new subject, right? Quote is a conjunction. It's joining two clauses together, so we have a separate subject. Gaius, who is the dad, gerere solet, is accustomed to wearing. There's the same complementary infinitive that we saw before. He's accustomed to wearing, or he usually wears, a togam virilem, a plain white toga, right? The toga of manhood, in urbe, in the city. Right, so it's saying that Gaius gets his toga packed, the children are getting all their clothing packed, everyone's getting ready to leave. Then you have Gaius ipse, togam virilem induit. So Gaius himself, Gaius ipse, that's your subject, induit, puts on, right, puts on the toga viriles, right, the toga virilem, the toga of manhood. So he puts on his own toga, and he has a bunch of other togas being packed away. Now we have the new section. You have Davus, qui ipse omnia curat, ad januum stat. So Davus, who himself, right? Qui ipse, qui means who, ipse means himself, right? Who himself, curat omnia, is taking care of everything. Now, omnia is an interesting word. We've seen it used as a subject and also as a direct object. Here you have to figure out that omnia, everything, would be a plural word, so it's not going to be the subject of curat. What you're looking at here is a neuter noun, which is something that we'll get to later. But for right now, just understand it's a direct object. You're saying, what is he taking care of? He's taking care of everything, right? Ad januum stat. So you have to go back to the beginning. Davus, right? Ad januum stat. He's standing, stat, ad januum, at the door. So if you put it all together, you're saying Davus, who himself is taking care of everything, is standing at the door. Davus is the overseer, right? And again, the idea here is that he's managing everything. He's making sure everything gets done, that all the slaves are in the right place, and that the family is getting ready. Then you have servos, eubet, kistas e cubiculis in viam portare. So he orders, meaning Davus orders, eubet, the slaves, servos. He orders them to do what? At the very end, you find it, portare, right? He orders them to carry. What are they carrying? Kistas, the trunks, meaning the same chests or trunks that just got filled with clothes. He orders them to carry the trunks, a cubiculis, out of the bedrooms. And again, it's ablative because you're going out of. So out of the bedrooms and in viam, into the road. Again, viam is accusative, so it means into in this sense, right? So he's saying he orders them to carry all the chests that they just got ready, filled with clothes, out of the bedrooms and into the road. Baculum habet et clama agite servi scelesti. Right, so he's holding habet, a baculum, a stick. He's threatening them, basically. He's got a club in his hand, right? So he's holding the stick as a threat, and he's shouting, clama. Here you have agite. There's our first imperative. You can tell it's an imperative because it has the te ending, and it's in a quote with an exclamation point at the end. So it implies that someone's commanding someone to do something. Agite comes from agere. Ago agere means like, come on, hurry up, right? Let's get going. So he's saying agite, right? A plural command. Come on, servi scelesti, right? That's what he calls the slaves. It's vocative. Come on, annoying slaves, right? Hurry up. Then he says, dormitisne, are you sleeping? Again, the ne means you're asking a yes or no question. That's all it means. So the verb here is dormitis, right? You all are sleeping. Since it's a question, he's asking, are you all sleeping? And he says, hodie non cras discedimus. Today, hodie, not tomorrow, non cras, discedimus, right? We are leaving. And again, notice the mus on discedimus. We are leaving, meaning the family. So he's saying, let's go, right? We got stuff to do. Are you asleep? Meaning like, hurry up. We got to get out of here today, not tomorrow. Then you get the next section. You have Marcus, quoque servos incitat, et eubet eos kistas in raidam ponere. So Marcus also, right, quoque, incitat, urges on. Who does he urge on? The servos, the slaves. So he's also urging on the slaves, just like Davus is. And he orders eubet, right, eos, them. Notice the os ending on it. It's accusative plural masculine. So he orders them, meaning the slaves, ponere, to put the kistas, the chests, in raidam, into the carriage. So Marcus is also telling them to hurry up and get these chests into the carriage. Servus quidam nomine geta, kistam sexti aripet et in raidam jacet. So a certain slave, quidam means a certain or some slave, right? One of them, named Geta, right? And again, that should be read. It's not vocative here. It's nominative, but named Geta. Aripet grabs the kistam, the chest. Sexti here is genitive, so it's the chest of Sextus. And jacet throws it in raidam, into the carriage. So one of the slaves, named Geta, takes the trunk of Sextus, right? He grabs it and he throws it into the carriage. The key word here is throws. He's not supposed to do that, and you're going to see what happens next. So now we continue. And you have cave Geta exclamat Sextus solicitus, curam kistam meo, noli eam jacere. So again, we have cave Geta, watch out or be careful, Geta. Right? Here's another imperative, kawe. It's kawere, which means to be careful, to watch out. But we've lost the re. This is that singular positive imperative. So Sextus, solicitus, so anxious Sextus, exclamat, he shouts. So Sextus is the one shouting this because it was his trunk. He says, be careful, Geta, watch out. Right? Kura kistam meum. right? He says, take care of my chest, right? Take care of it. Don't throw it is kind of the idea, right? And he says it right after that, noli eam iacere, do not throw it. And this is the idea. So as a slave, you're not supposed to be throwing the master's stuff. You're supposed to do what you're told. And they said, go place it in the carriage. Geta throws it, and you're going to see it's setting up the next couple stories, right? But Sextus is saying, hey, watch out. Be careful with my chest, okay? Then you have tandem omnes quistae in rida sunt. So at last, or finally, tandem omnes quistae, all the chests are in the carriage, in rida. And again, it's ablative because it's saying they're inside the carriage. Then you have ascendant, so it's saying they climb up, and you're about to see who the they is. It's Marcus at Sextus, right? So Marcus and Sextus climb up. Ascendit Eucleides, right? Eucleides climbs up, or climbs in, you might think. Then you have ascendit Aurelia, so Aurelia climbs up, right? Everyone's climbing in. You have Gaius ipse ascendere est paratus. So Gaius himself is paratus. He's ready, ascendere, to climb up, meaning he hasn't climbed up yet, but he's ready to. He's prepared to climb up. Then you have Cyrus Rydarius, quoque ascendit, et equos incitare parat. So Cyrus, right, here's another slave, the Rydarius, he's the coachman. So he's the slave who's going to be driving the rida, the carriage. He also climbs up, quoque ascendit. And he parat, he prepares to urge on incitare, the equos, the horses. So he climbs up and he's ready to urge on the horses, right? Then you have subito exclama Aurelia, ubi est Cornelia. So suddenly Aurelia shouts out, right? So the mom is the one who notices that Cornelia isn't there. And she says, ubi est Cornelia, where is Cornelia? Eo ipso tempore in viam currit Cornelia. So at that very moment, into the road, right, in viam, Cornelia currit. So Cornelia runs into the road, right? And again, it's because, remember, she had been seeing Flavia beforehand, and she's just apparently not ready. So they're getting ready to go. They don't know where she is, and now she comes running out. Eam Gaius Eubet in raidam statim ascendere. So Gaius, the dad, orders Eubet, Eam, her. Notice the am ending is feminine, so it's referring back to Cornelia. So he orders her, ascendere, to climb up in raidam, into the carriage. And again, it's accusative here because she'd be going into the carriage, right? It's motion into. Statim just means immediately. So he immediately orders her to climb up or get into the carriage. Statim Rydarius equos incitat discedunt Cornelii. So immediately the Rydarius, the coachman, right, his name is Cyrus, incitat equos, he urges on, incitat, the equos, the horses. And the Cornelius says, Cornelii discedunt, they depart, right, they head off to Rome. So that's the chapter story. And again, the key focus here is you're noticing the verbs, and they keep giving you a lot of verbs in repetition. You might have noticed in this previous slide, you have ascendit over and over again and ascendant. The book is trying to get you to catch on to the verb endings and the spelling of these verbs, the conjugating of them, right? That's the big grammar point. But as long as you follow along and you keep, paying attention to the verb endings and your noun endings, you're going to be totally fine. There's nothing particularly crazy here. It's just getting used to looking at verb endings and noun endings to make sure you understand where the subject is, where's a direct object, and putting it all together. And the other thing you want to keep in mind is looking for imperatives in this story, right? There's a few of them in this previous slide. You have kawe geta, right? Be careful geta. That's a positive singular imperative. And then you have noli yam iacere, right? Noli plus an infinitive is a negative singular imperative. So one is saying do this, right? Kawe geta, be careful, right? Do be careful. Noli is saying don't, right? Noli iacere, don't throw. So just pay attention to those as you go. It's just trying to make sure that you understand how the imperative commands work. But otherwise, good luck. Make sure you're reading through. And if you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comments. I'll help you however I can. But make sure you read through this story again, read it out loud, and practice your pronunciation, your speaking, and your listening.